following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Thank you, Tally Olson. We are back. When the Jints, Dem Bums, and the Yanks all played in New York. The three mavens of the time. We have three. David Nemec is joining us. David is here. Hello, David.
Hi, Ralph. Good to be with you once again.
Good. Alan Blumkin and Noel.
Hello, everybody.
Good to hear your voice. Good to hear all three of your voices. Going to talk a little bit about spring training and how it was back then, and what it's like today. If there's any resemblance to spring training back in the day. I'd like you to talk about Dodger Town a little bit and the Giants training in Arizona, Yankees sharing a field with the Cardinals, Miller Huggins Field in St. Pete. Much to talk about, and I know you guys will digress into whatever comes to mind to bring us back to those days of yesteryear. So because he's the guest, I'd like to start with David Nemec. Have a great show, guys.
Thanks, Ralph.
David.
Yes.
Start us off.
Well, as a kid growing up, I knew the New York Giants better than I knew, even though I was from Cleveland. I knew the Giants better than I did most of the American League teams, because the Giants and Indians trained in Arizona. They were among the few teams that didn't train in Florida. And they must have played like 25, 30 games every spring. And all the games were featured in the Cleveland Plain Dealer and the Cleveland Press and the Cleveland News. There were three papers in Cleveland then, believe it or not. And so I knew the Giants lineup, the Giants roster, better than I did the Yankees. The first year I really followed closely was 1947. And my father was helping me along, and he was telling me about Mel Ott, the Giants team as a whole. And he said these guys, they play in a very strange park, the Polo Grounds, where they get a lot of home runs, and they haven't won a pennant in a while, but they look pretty good this year. To me, they look pretty good. All we got was radio, of course. But they did broadcast all the spring training games into Cleveland that weren't played the afternoon. You see, they started pretty early in the day in Cleveland. So they must have played at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So they started about 4 o'clock. My father's just getting home from work. And so I started following the Giants in 47. Little did I know that this team would set a record for most team home runs over the course of the season. And I was actually finding myself rooting for them. And it was the only time in my life that I can remember rooting for a National League team as opposed to Cleveland for a full season. Even though the Giants didn't contend for the pennant, I remember the guy I remember most is Clint Hartung. And he came up really ballyhooed, and it was amazing how much press he got, how much time he got in the radio. I think I even heard him interviewed one day, and everybody thought this guy was going to become the next Babe Ruth, a right-handed Babe Ruth, and of course he didn't. But he did give us a lot of pleasure. I think he played for a number of years. Was just good enough to hang on and both pitch and play the outfield. And that whole Giants team in 47 was a lot of fun, and it really brought me in closer to baseball much quicker than I would have probably come into it otherwise. So just wanted to share that because that was really a treasure, that spring training in 1947.
That was quite a team of sluggers, too, wasn't it?
It was. Walker Cooper, Bobby Thompson, Yeah, and then they had guys like Whitey Loughlin who didn't hit many home runs.
Willard Marshall.
Sid Gordon. So they all hit 20, 25, 30 home runs. And Ott, of course, didn't do much. I don't know. I think he got a few at bats. I think in 47, if I recall right. But wasn't really a contributor.
I was the manager of that.
Yeah, Did he play at all? I don't remember if he did.
Just working off memory from when I was writing the Giants at the Polo Grounds. I believe Ott started the season and then had an injury, and very, very soon into the year, I'm just looking at some stats right now, and I'm seeing that he was in 4 games. That kind of ties in with what I said. I think he hurt his shoulder or maybe a leg in the outfield, and that was pretty much it. And he also, at that point, felt overwhelmed playing and managing. So it was a pretty brief appearance, I believe, in the spring of 1947, and that was it.
Yeah, that's kind of my memory too. I didn't hear any of the games in which he played, of course, being in Cleveland, but I remember in spring training. I remember some at bats, him coming to bat in spring training.
Just to throw some numbers around home runs that year. Johnny Mize had 51. We're talking about 1947. Mize had 51, which probably was the highest number since maybe Fox and Greenberg.
Well, Greenberg, 38. Greenberg hit 58, and Fox hit 50. When year did Fox hit 58? 30.
31 maybe? 30.
No, he did that when he was with Boston.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Johnny Mize also struck out, I think, 42 times that year.
I know.
Which is
nobody
unbelievable.
Appreciated that then. You look at that stat now, and it's unbelievable.
As usual, your memory is pristine. I'm looking at the stats right now, and you're absolutely right. Mize struck out 42 times. And strangely enough, Walker Cooper only struck out 43 times. So you had these, and Cooper hit 35 home runs. So that was a tough batting order. If it had some pitching to go with it, they might have finished much higher.
They also
had a great rookie. They had Larry Jansen, a terrific year.
They had no speed.
Yes, that is true.
Yeah. Apparently, if they had no speed, they weren't all that great defensively.
No.
Yeah,
Buddy Kerr.
29 stolen bases, meaning every 6 game or so somebody stole a base.
And Buddy Kerr, Billy Rigney, those guys weren't. Kerr was on the way down then.
Rigney played in 130 games and stole 7 bases and led the team in stolen bases with 7. So basically basically the strategy was get on base and stand there until somebody hits one down the left or right field line.
And of course, we can't forget the immortal Jack Lucky Lorky. Oh, man.
Lucky Lorky, yeah.
Yeah.
I forget the actual specifics, but he missed I know he was bumped off a flight during World War II, which
no, he was bumped off a bus.
No, there were a few of them. The bus thing was not the only one. Noel was right about him getting bumped from a plane. There was a couple other things too, which I really don't remember. But the bus was only one of them.
Yeah, there was a team bus, and there was a couple of things while he was in the military service.
Yeah,
weren't there? It seemed like there were 3 or 4 incidents, and if you wanted to live a long life, just follow him, because he was going to get land on his feet. I don't think there's anybody still around from these teams, are there?
No.
No. Yeah, I'm just looking over the roster. Here's a name I haven't thought of in years. Gary Gerhardt.
Oh yeah.
I have no idea
He played 73 games in 1947. You could probably get New York Giants fans climbing out, fill a barn with him.
Yeah.
You wouldn't find more than one or two who'd ever heard
I never heard of the guy until now.
I know.
Yeah.
This is 1947. Buddy Blattner played 55.
Yeah.
Mickey Whittick played 51. Joe LaFata, he played 62 games. These guys are Bobby Ron, Babe Young. Wow, what a roster! I didn't realize that. This is a really colorful roster with just guys who had man, Bobby Ron had one home run.
And even when you look at the roster, overshadowed by some of the more famous names of that era, you have the young Bobby Thompson, who was 23 years old and who hit 29 home runs that year.
That was his rookie year. I think Lorky was a rookie. Thompson was a rookie. Jansen was a rookie.
Yeah.
They had a very good and Hartung was a rookie. They had a
I think Lockman only
cast.
played a couple of games that year because he broke his leg in spring training.
Yeah, he did. He
2 games.
He lost a lot of his speed, from that. And when DeRocha took over as the manager in 1948, they cleaned house. And the next couple of years, Thompson, Lockman, and I'm talking about the regulars, Thompson, Lockman, and Bobby Jansen were the only ones they kept. They got rid of everybody else over the next couple of years. Rigney kept it. He was a utility infielder.
He kept bringing. They made that big trade with Gordon and Marshall.
Yeah,
going in the trade with the Braves and got.
My opinion of that is that made the Giants contenders, and there's the first step on for the Braves, causing them to leave Boston.
Yeah, I think
there was a whole thing that Stanky and Doc. Billy Southworth, who was the manager there in Boston, started to drink again. And Stanky and Doc couldn't stand his drinking.
Well, we're going off on a tangent now, but
I know,
Southworth was really a very tragic figure. He had great success on the baseball field, but I know he lost 2 daughters who were stillborn. I believe his wife predeceased him by several years. And then at the end of World War II, Billy Southworth Jr. died in New York City in a
training accident.
Yeah.
And that quite a biography came out on Southworth a few years ago that really broke him. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons the Cardinals didn't bring him back in 1946.
That I never understood why they got rid of him after 45. Whether it was mutual or whether it was drinking or whether
he started drinking after the son got. He couldn't get away from that. His son, who was fit and everything, survived a whole bunch of missions in Europe during World War II. It gets killed in a training accident at LaGuardia. I think he was 28.
Yeah.
And he never recovered from that.
Yeah, he was. He had been in baseball also. I forget whether he was in the major leagues, but he played minor league ball. Billy Southworth Jr.
Yeah, he did.
Going back to spring training in the year that we're talking about, David, were there any other teams training in Arizona other than the Giants and the Indians?
Well, the Cubs were out there. The Cubs trained in Catalina Island for a number of years. I'm not sure how many. That must have been a really pleasure-filled spring training because it's a nice little island, And I'm sure teams love to go out there, take the ferry out there for the day and play, and just kind of hang out in the town and drink, and it's an interesting little place.
I know what changed.
When they left there.
A friend of mine was driving. He and his wife were driving back from Florida, and they stopped to go to an exhibition game between the Yankees and I think the Tigers. And the tickets were the cheapest tickets were $40.
Oh, is that right?
The whole thing has changed down there. They really at some point the owners decided that they could make a ton of money off this.
Oh, I'm sorry. The $40 was currently, right?
For a ticket, for one ticket. So he and his wife was $80 for this. Yeah.
I'll tell you something. I was in Arizona earlier this month, and my wife and I went to 2 games. We saw the Giants and Kansas City play at Surprise, Arizona, because I was talking to a baseball book group there. And then we went over to Scottsdale the next day to visit that old stadium that has no parking. And saw the Giants play the Angels, and it was fun. Everybody was in a good mood, but I can honestly say I spent more than $100 each day for the tickets. Not $100 a piece, but I think I spent like $120 one day and maybe $130 the next day to get, what were essentially pretty good seats. Cheaper than at a major league game during the season, but you're absolutely right. Gone are the days when a spring training game was a cheap way to take the family to a ball game. Unless, of course, you sit. Most of these parks now, it seems, are training ballparks, and there is room in the outfield. They often have a grassy area that you can settle in with a young family. But, of course, you better watch out for those home run balls coming out there also.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the Cubs are out west. But was there a 4th team out west in the area in the late 40s?
I don't think
so. I'm trying to remember. I remember. It seemed like the Giants and Indians played every day. I mean, they played the Cubs too, and mixed in there. And there was anybody else out there that had to be a 4th team, or otherwise one team is going to be off every day. I'm trying to remember who it could have been.
And this Alvin Dark book I have that he wrote, I had somebody write from called When in Doubt, Fire the Manager. He said in 1954 they were not in awe of the Indians because they played them, so often in spring training.
Yeah, they well, there was nobody out there then either.
Now, one year, 51, the Giants and Yankees swapped training sites for the 1 year. And the Yankees were in Arizona, the Giants were in St. Petersburg, and that was the spring training that Mickey Mantle came up.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Huh.
Stengel ran what he called the instructional school, and he brought the promising farmhands. They brought Mantle, who was coming up from Joplin, which was a C League, and Mantle was hitting these balls all over the place. And they went out to California. They played a game at USC where he supposedly hit a ball that went 600 feet, and he became the biggest sensation in spring training in quite a while. But they traded Arizona in that year. And then the next year, 1952, it went back to what it was. And then,
so they used the same facility. They used the same facility the Giants used.
Yeah, and then in 1952, Monty Irvin broke his leg in spring training game, and it basically cost them the 3/4 of the season.
Yeah, it basically cost him his career. He was never the same again.
Yeah,
that was really sad. I remember. Yeah, seeing the picture of, I think was it Aaron who was there in the picture with him, or just Thompson standing over, after
I think it was Thompson, down.
Just Thompson, I know.
Thompson, 2 years later, when they traded him to the Braves, in the Antonelli deal, he broke his leg in spring training, and some kid named Henry Aaron, coming up from April, replaced him.
Right. Yeah, that's how I made that. So. Yeah.
Well, by the mid '50s, there were about maybe 6 or 8 teams out in Arizona, correct?
No, I think it was that early.
I'm trying to think who they could have been.
No, because I used to know them all. The only two that really left.
I think the Cubs moved from Catalina Island to Arizona. I think in the late 40s. I'm not really sure, but wish I had a history of the spring training here.
The only two that really left, where they were that long ago. The Phillies are still in Clearwater, and the Tigers are still in Lakeland.
Yeah. Everybody else has changed.
Yeah, Dodgers are in Arizona now. They shut down Dodgertown, which Ricky had built because basically because of the African Americans coming up.
Yeah.
That's kind of where I was going with this, and I'm just scanning something right now. And Baltimore, the Orioles were in Scottsdale in '56 through '58. The Red Sox were in Scottsdale in '59, but I have, and looks like the White Sox were out there in 1960. Where I'm going with this was, it seemed to me, and I have read this, that Arizona grew up because there were several, as a spring training site, because more and more rosters had African American players, and there was resistance in Florida to house these athletes in motels that basically catered to white people during the season. Let's toss that around for a second. Overall,
you're absolutely right. I remember as a kid even reading about that. You're absolutely
Well, in the movie 42 about Jackie Robinson, which I thought was pretty well done, that's one of the things in spring training. They practice in Dodgertown, but to sleep for the night, they local black families took them in.
Yeah,
they couldn't stay at whatever hotel that the majority of them stayed.
Yeah, and I remember this goes back a ways when the first time I read Bill Beck's book, Beck as in Rick. He recounted talking to motel owners in Florida and telling them that, next year it's going to be different, and obviously he got resistance. And in attempting to be fair about this, which is for me not that easy because let's face it, it's overt racism and bigotry, but the motel owners said, if we put these guys up here, I'm going to lose all my regular season customers because they're not going to want to stay at a place where black people have stayed. So that was the problem, and Beck, to my knowledge, was very instrumental about Cleveland being the first team to go west so that you wouldn't have that problem anymore.
Well, they went west before they integrated. They didn't get Dobie till the middle of '47, and they started. I think with '47, I think was their first year. It could be that Beck plan. It could be that Beck planned to integrate and went there for that very reason, though. It would have been a very, very clever move on his part, all in all. And the Giants integrated fairly quickly too, so that worked to both of their benefits very, very well.
Yeah, I'm trying to do a quick scan here, and as to when the Giants were out there for the first time. But certainly the Giants were out there as long as I can remember. And I can remember listening to, baseball in 56, 57. The Giants were in the stadium that actually they're still in, but it was, I think, a wooden grandstand for many years also.
Yeah.
In fact, if I can dump this in, when I was in Scottsdale a couple of weeks ago, I got talking to a guy yesterday next to me who had grown up in the Scottsdale area. Fascinating guy. He had been born out there, and he said that his father was part of the team in the 1940s that built the new ballpark in Scottsdale, which I guess was with a wooden grandstand. But he couldn't believe. This was a guy who was telling me how he rode his horse to school as a kid living in the Scottsdale area, and they had a corral at the school because a lot of kids came in on horseback.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was fascinating. Talking to this guy for several innings was actually better than the game because it turned into a rout. And if there's anything more boring than a rout during the regular season, it's one in the preseason where basically you're starting to see numbers like 77, 99.
Yeah.
And it just goes on and on. But later, this fellow, I never got his last name. His first name was Steve. Moved to New York, became a photographer, was one of the founding people in a big advertising agency in New York. But I spent a couple of innings just listening to old Scottsdale stories. It was absolutely fascinating, well worth the price of my ticket. But I do remember, as both of you do, the stories about the black players who couldn't go to restaurants in Florida, couldn't stay with the rest of the team, and obviously an organization like the Giants could kind of see what they were dealing with, and hence it seems to me that was part of the reason they went out there, because obviously the Giants had some damn good black talent on the roster and coming up, from Minneapolis, including you-know-who, probably the greatest player ever, but off on a tangent a little bit. Here's something I've always wondered about. Maybe either of you can tell me. I can remember when the Dodgers opened their own facility in Vero Beach, Dodger Town. Was that in response to housing black players also?
I think that was part of it.
Yeah, it seems to me
I have a friend of mine who's a Dodger fan, Tom Zacco, and he and his father used to go down to Vero Beach for a couple of weeks every year. They said it was tremendous. Tremendous. They had all the minor leaguers that they had trained there, and it was really tremendous, and it wasn't expensive to visit. But then again, they pulled out a number of years ago when went to either Arizona or California.
Yeah,
the Dodgers.
I did. Yeah.
There was one time when Casey Stengel was doing training with the Yankees. They had a few diamonds in St. Petersburg there, and Casey Stengel said they were playing split games. Casey said, send these guys over to the other diamond. I want to see how they play on the road.
Yeah, I'm just looking something up here.
Yeah,
the Cubs trained at Catalina Island from 1922 to 1942, and then came back in 50 and 51. And 47 was the first year that the Indians and Giants trained. They were the only two teams training out there. Now, what the Cubs did for spring training games, I don't know, because I don't think any other teams were out there in the 20s, 30s, and early 40s. I think they must have played college teams and
minor league teams, yeah.
Minor league teams.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Pacific Coast League would also be spring training about the same time, so they would probably be playing the L.A. Angels and the Seals and Hollywood Stars, and they probably had a full slate of games with those teams.
Well, don't forget Wrigley was a major owner in the Pacific Coast League because he owned the Los Angeles franchise, didn't he?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, so
he owned the park, owned the franchise. Yeah.
So he had, one way or another, he had a lot of players in the area.
He traded the rights to L.A. to O'Malley for the rights to Fort Worth, Texas.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was, in 1951 was the first year I followed it all. I got to it because of the baseball cards. My parents had really no interest. And I got very, very interested. 1952 I followed and I watched. I was able to go home from school to watch most of that World Series. And in 53 was the first year that I really, really followed on a day-by-day basis. And then, they started spring training in 1954. And all of a sudden, I'm 10 years old at the time. All of a sudden, they make an announcement on the radio that the Yankees sold Vic Raschi to the Cardinals. And I was up all night crying. I couldn't believe that they did this. I was all night crying. I couldn't sleep. I said, how could they do this? How could they do this? I didn't realize it. That was, I first realized that this was a business.
Well, you kept your naivete for quite a while because by the 40s, I learned pretty quickly that players were expendable.
Yeah, well, the Yankees were owned by Topping and Webb. They didn't give a damn about exhibition games.
Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah, one year, I read one year they got off to a hot start after looking terrible in the exhibition games. And some writer asked Eddie Lopat, what's going on? He said the bell rang.
Yeah.
But they didn't care. And then when Steinbrenner took over and they lost an exhibition game to the Mets, Steinbrenner went ballistic.
Yeah, well, the games did mean they did mean something in those days because there were only 16 teams and there were 50 minor leagues in 1946. So spots, on a major league team were really, really precious. So when spring training started, those games from the very outset were played. They were pretty serious games because there were guys who were fighting like hell to get that 24th and 25th spot on the roster. And they would carry, I think, into May 15th, if I'm not mistaken. I don't remember when this ended. They would carry expanded rosters. I'm not sure if they were 30 or as many as 40, but there were definitely as many as 30. And the cutdown date was May 15th. So they would, players would fight to get those spots in spring training and hold on to the spots once the season started. But nobody's been able to tell me when that ended. I would swear it ended sometime in the 50s.
In 1946, of course, most of the players came back from the war.
Well, and they expanded the rosters.
So besides the minor leaguers, you have all these returning veterans.
Yeah, and they carried 30 players all year long. And if you look at the World Series rosters for the Red Sox and Cardinals, you'll see names you've never seen before in a big league roster. They were eligible for the series because they carried 30 into the series.
I did a little profile yesterday. I'm in a group called Sweet 16, which is baseball before the first expansion, basically 01 to 1960. And somebody put something about Virgil Trucks. So I did a bit of a profile. And one of the things I learned about him is that in 1945 he won a World Series game and had no victories during the regular season. He came out late and was given special dispensation. I think the Tigers and Cubs were allowed to expand their rosters to 28 for the series. So the only other one that I could remember doing that was a Red Sox relief pitcher in 1986 named Steve Crawford, who won the second game of the World Series for the Red Sox against the Mets and had no wins in the regular season.
But he pitched during the regular season.
Yeah, he pitched during the regular season.
Yeah.
But Trucks had one appearance. I just looked this up last night.
Is Mark Kiger still the only guy who's played in postseason, never played in the regular season?
Yeah.
He's still the only one. Yeah, that was an interesting when that happened.
The Yankees in 1964 had a player named Chet Trail on the World Series roster. Never played in a major league game. Never played in the World Series either, but he never played in a major league game.
How did he get on the roster?
Kubek got hurt.
Okay.
He was an infielder. Kubek was hurt. They had to use Phil Linz at shortstop for the series, and so they brought this guy up to fill in, and he never played an inning. I remember I was looking through that World Series program, and I see this guy. I said, "Who the heck is he?" This is before Baseball Reference, so it was a little hard to find stuff like that.
Oh,
yeah, very
difficult. Yeah, you'd have to go to a public library and go through reels and reels of microfilm. All three of us remember when research was like that. You can find stuff with one click stroke now that it used to take 2 weeks to find in the New York Public Library.
There's a funny story. Well, I went 1988. I did a presentation at the Sabre National on players who missed time by being in the military during the Korean War. I mean, most of them were nowhere near combat, but they were players who missed a couple of seasons. And Willie Mays, in 1952, played 34 games. His draft board was switched from Alabama to New York, and all it did was buy him 2 weeks. And I wanted to see if he had missed any games during the time he was with the Giants that season. No, he didn't. But I found a couple of very funny things. One, the Pirates are training out there out in California in 1952. And Ranch Rickey instructed the players not to bring wives. So Gus Bell brought his wife and his infant child to spring training. The infant child was Buddy. And and even though Bell was a very good player and pretty young, Rickey traded him to the Reds after 1952, and probably one of the worst trades he ever made. Hal Abrams, a catcher named George Rossi, and an outfielder named Gail Henley, who I think DeRocha, when the Giants had, thought was going to be a superstar.
Gail Henley looked like a ball player. He looked like a really good ball player, but he never showed it when the game started.
No. And Bell became an all-star for 7 or 8 years.
Yeah, he was good.
But that's the kind of stuff that went on. But I never would have found out that if I wasn't on the microfilm looking for Mays' games.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just glancing at something here right now, and the Pirates trained in Hollywood, California in 1948, and San Bernardino from 49 to 52. So, again, another example of teams that were in the West, even if they weren't actually in Arizona.
And then they moved back to Florida and Fort Myers. They're now in Bradenton, where the Braves used to be years ago.
Yeah. It's funny. Some of those cities, when I was growing up, it seemed like the teams were there forever, like the Cardinals and the Yankees in St. Petersburg. Like when I was 11 years old, it seemed that they'd been there forever and should really be there forever. And then, of course, baseball is a business, and later on they built new sites and got new land, and it became much more corporate.
As I said, the only two that have been in the same places forever are the Phillies in Clearwater and the Tigers in Lakeland.
Yeah. Let me just I'm just taking a look at where the Phillies trained. Philadelphia Phillies. Yeah, they've been in Clearwater since 1947, and before that they were in Miami. During the war, Wilmington, Delaware, where they must have frozen, and then before that, Florida. Several teams before our time trained in Texas also. You might remember that, but I don't know whether anybody actually.
There were teams in the 19th century who trained in the South. I think Texas was one of the places they went. Although they got swamp fever, and that kind of ended that pretty quickly. But I had an interesting experience when I was in high school. I played on the field where the Philadelphia A's trained for their last season when they were in Philadelphia, which was in Connie Mack Stadium in West Palm Beach, Florida. And they trained. We went to their spring training game to go before practice. And I was playing on a West Palm Beach team. And all the guys came through. You know, the Dodgers, the Yankees, Cardinals. We saw all the really, good ball players. And they were like sitting in the stands with us at various points in the game. It was basically a high school field. There weren't any dugouts. I mean, there were dugouts, but most of the players sat on the open benches because there were so many of them, many more than could fit in the dugout. And we actually played a couple of scrimmage games against their B team because their B team had nobody to play. I mean, they would take a team up to Vero Beach, or they would take a team down to Miami to play an exhibition game, and they leave like 20 guys behind. And those guys had nothing to do. They didn't have an extra field for minor league players or hangers on or whatever. So they ended up playing in the high school team in that, a practice game. So we got some experience and against some pretty good ball players. I got to bat against the famous Ozzie Van Brabant, who won major league experience at bat, as it were.
The Dodgers traded Cuba a few years.
Yeah. Yeah, which was really something for a discussion for another day because, of course, Havana was controlled by the mob at the time, and a lot of those guys would come to the games, and the next thing you knew, they were sitting down in the box seats next to management of major league teams, and the commissioner was not that happy about some of it, much less the players getting into the casinos at night. But once again, that's pre-Castro Cuba that was going on. Late 40s, I think you're talking about, Alan, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I think they trained down there. They trained down there once or twice when Jackie Robinson came there just to escape the racism in Florida. Yes,
I think they would go over for a day or something like that, or go over and play the. They actually, I'm looking at this also. The Dodgers played in the Dominican Republic in 1948 also.
Wow, I didn't know that. Well.
Yeah, well, that's what my research is showing me. They trained in Havana in 47, and then in Ciudad Trujillo in the Dominican in 1948. And then right after that, they moved into Vero Beach and stayed there from 49 to 2008.
Mike, can you imagine if some team training the Dominican now? Because you got, 30% of the major leaguers are from there now?
Yeah. It would actually be more receptive now because, of course, it wasn't called Ciudad Trujillo for no reason at all. It was probably one of the most brutal dictators during the 20th century.
If they got rid of him, they changed it back to Santo Domingo.
Yeah. Got rid of him was a euphemism. I believe he was shot through his limousine, through the window of his limousine on his way home one day. And then the government, of course, then cracked down on everybody. But we're getting way off the topic of spring training. In any case, we've been on for about 45 minutes, so time to wrap up unless there's any parting, closing thoughts.
No, this is a very informative experience.
Yeah, this was very. I learned things from this. This has been very, very interesting.
Yeah, the whole history of spring training was. Yeah, I don't know if you guys ever want to talk about the early days of spring training, but really early. I mean, because the teams did start to go to other places way back in the 1880s. Chicago Anson always took his team south. And other teams started following along. It was interesting how different spring training was then. But I can tell you a little bit about it, and maybe we can fill in from that and move it forward at some other point in time.
Okay. Okay. Sounds like another show.
Yeah, I think Ralph will enjoy this one.
I've enjoyed this, so I'm gonna.
Okay.
I'm gonna go ahead, Alan. You can close us out if you want.
Okay. You'll want to thank both Noel and David for a very interesting and very informative discussion on spring training. It's just something I really hadn't discussed with anybody ever, where I could remember ever discussing this with anyone. So I think it was very, very informative. And I think whoever listens to this podcast will find it very, very interesting. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you,
really
David. David, look forward to having you with us again soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
The proceeding has been a Comfortably Zoned network production. You are advised to keep your dreams wet, your humor dry, your children and grandchildren out of military recruiting offices and off the laps of clerics who wear dresses. Thank you for listening, everyone. Happy trails.